Today we're going to be talking all about the iconic sunflower. You might ask, why are you going to do a video about sunflowers? There's all kinds of videos about sunflowers and teaching sunflowers and farming sunflowers, but you might want to stick around because I'm going to tell you how I do it, and I do it a little differently than a lot of people, and I'm going to tell you why and how I do it. Let's dive right in. Over the past 6 years, I have planted tens of thousands of sunflowers. So I'm going to explain exactly how I do that. And the process has evolved. So I don't plant them exactly the same today as I did 6 years ago. I get a lot of questions about why I do them the way that I do them. So I'm hoping to be able to answer those questions in this video. I grow sunflowers from mid-June until our frost, middle of October. Sometimes they get killed a little early because of an early frost, and if that's the case, then that's just the way it goes. So I do about 18 successions of sunflowers. How does that even work? Like, what does that mean, right? First, I'm going to talk about why I transplant them, because a lot of farmers growing at this level would not transplant them. They wouldn't plant the seeds in cell trays in their grow rooms and grow them into little plugs and transplant them. Most people growing at a larger scale will direct seed them with some kind of a direct seeder. I don't do that, and I'm going to explain why. So pretty much the reason why is because Lisa Mason Ziegler from the Gardener's Workshop, who I took her course, Flower Farming the Basics, from in 2020, she doesn't do it that way, and she's planted tens of thousands of them. And so that's who was my mentor, is my mentor still, and that's how she taught me how to do them. So that's really the reason why I started doing it that way, for sure. The reason is you can grow them without any pressure. When you direct seed them, you're dealing with bird pressure of birds digging up the seeds and eating them, and other environmental factors that you just don't have to worry about when you plant them inside. The other thing is when you're planting them outside, you're often dependent on the weather. We do have irrigation, but if you don't, then you'd be dependent on the rain, which large scale farmers that plant acres and acres, like that's how they do it. But when you're planting on a small scale, you're depending on a really small area for a crop. So that area is really important. So I'm not dependent on myself to water those newly direct seeded crops like twice a day in the heat of the summer in order to get them to germinate for multiple days, right? Those are the reasons why I direct seed. I don't have to worry about the weather. I don't have to worry about the birds. And I also don't have to worry about the weeds. I do not ever weed my sunflowers. And yes, I do have weeds in them, but I don't weed them because sunflowers are a very fast growing crop. And so they outcompete the weeds. They win over the weeds. When you plant them as transplants, your transplants are going to overcome the weeds. If you're planting them as seeds and you're watering them and fertilizing them, you're also watering and fertilizing all the weeds. And so typically you have to weed them. I don't have to do that step. And to me, this is just an easier process. So that's why I transplant them. How do I do it? Well, I start in early spring before my frost. So I'm in zone 6 in West Michigan. We usually get our last spring frost in the middle of May and our first fall frost in mid-October. Although we can easily get frost later than that. This year we had frost June 1st and 2nd. They usually say like Memorial Day, and that really is the case. Mid-May is like iffy, but in theory, that's our frost date. Sunflowers, when they are small plugs, they actually can withstand the frost. They don't die from the frost typically at that stage. And you'll see it in nature. You'll see sunflowers starting to pop up voluntarily in early spring before your last frost, probably. So that kind of gives you a clue that, oh, okay, this is what nature is doing. So I can plant my sunflowers now. That's not the same in the fall. If you get a fall frost, and even if your buds get like nipped with frost, they will be damaged. The blooms don't handle the frost, but the little seedlings can. They will grow better if they're warmer. They will just be more robust. They will be stronger. So if you're going to plant them early and try and get an early crop, which I've done in the past, it really is helpful if you cover them with row cover. They'll just do better. And when we had that frost June 1st and 2nd, my sunflowers totally had frost on them. I didn't have enough row cover to cover everything, and I was covering my zinnias and cosmos and some other tender stuff, and I didn't even bother with the sunflowers. I think I irrigated them though the next morning before the sun hit, so that does help. I used to do that. I used to try and get them really early, and I would have sunflowers by mid-June, which, like I said, our last frost is like mid-May, so that's pretty good. And people would be like, how do you have these already? Well, that's because I planted them early, planted them out early, covered them with row cover, so that's totally possible. This year, in all honesty, I didn't do that. I just did not get my first crop in, and I was kind of frustrated with myself. And then I realized the reason why I don't have this sunflower crop in is because I have a whole half a tunnel full of ranunculus and a whole tunnel full of stuff that I'm busy harvesting and all this other stuff. So I had this whole other factor. And honestly, like for me now, with having those earlier spring crops in the tunnel, probably spending all that extra time and energy to get sunflowers 10 days earlier might not be worth it. I plant them for about 18 weeks. So these are pro-cut sunflowers, and they're about a 50 to 60 day life cycle. So they're very fast. That means from like seed germination until bloom, it's about 55 to 60 days. Some of that depends on your temperature and the warmth and that kind of stuff. But they're pretty consistent sunflowers. I now plant them into paper pots, which if you don't know what that is, check out my last video that I did about paper pot transplanting and what that even is and what that means. But I used to plant them into 128 plug trays, and then I plant them, I cover them, I water them, I put them on a heat mat, put a humidity dome over them, and I don't touch them. I don't come back to them. I don't water them. 3 days later, I come back. They're germinated. I take them off of my heat mat. Unless it's early spring, I bring them directly outside onto my deck, where I have a table that I made a while ago with shelves on it for putting seedlings out onto. And it's actually perfect because our deck faces the east, and so it gets morning sun but afternoon shade, so it kind of helps those seedlings. They don't get beaten by the sun all day long, but they're acclimated. I never have to harden them off or anything, and it's just easy because I don't have lights on in my grow room in my basement all summer long. So once my spring crops are done and I have that done and I'm still planting sunflowers every week, I don't have to go down to the basement and water. I don't have to have lights on or anything. On the deck, they grow about 10 more days. It can vary, but 10 days to 2 weeks. Obviously, we transplant based on the weather and that kind of stuff. We don't transplant when it's raining. We're in a really major drought here, so we don't really have issues with raining this season. But sometimes, obviously that can be a factor. And then just, when it fits into your schedule. So for us, we try to transplant every Wednesday. It's just like a Wednesday job, and we put them in the trays in the basement on Wednesday. We're really good at it. We've become very fast at it. My oldest 2 children helped me. We timed it, and our record so far is 12 minutes. In 12 minutes, we plant 264 paper pots with sunflowers every week. It's about 750-ish plants a week. And then we get really good germination. Like, it just is a pretty easy process. And then my husband actually does all the transplanting with the paper pots now. We used to transplant them all by hand. If you want to learn more about that, check out that paper pot video. I kind of discussed that in there. So now my husband plants them with a paper pot transplanter. So to me, like, sunflowers are a super easy crop. It takes us 12 minutes, 15 minutes to get them into plug trays. We water them, put them on the heat mats. 3 days later, I come back, get them, we put them on the deck, I water them. I have a watering can, I see them, right? So they're easy to remember to water because you go in and out of the deck all the time. 10 to 14 days later, we transplant them outside. My husband does the transplanting, and it's easy. It's just, I don't know, it's become a rhythm. It's just become part of the farm and life, and it's not a very time consuming thing. So it's just easy to be like, quick, before dinner, we gotta get the sunflowers transplanted. So spacing, my beds are 3 feet wide, and then I space them usually in a 3-foot bed. I would put 6 to 7 rows of sunflowers, and then I put them about every 4 to 6 inches apart, like in row spacing, and then the rows are about 6 inches apart. When I use the paper pots, I use the 4-inch paper pot chains, so they're 4 inches apart, and then I try to space the chains like 6 inches apart from each other going down the bed. The size of the sunflower is determined by how tightly you space your sunflowers. So if you were to plant one pro-cut sunflower all by itself, I'm trying to find one, but all by its lonesome in a field, it would grow huge. But when you space them tightly together, they grow smaller, and so their heads are smaller. I like to get a really nice head like this size. So to me, this is kind of like a perfect sunflower size. It's about the size open of the palm of my hand. And this is a pro-cut white light, if you're wondering. They're all planted the same. This is a pro-cut orange, and it's significantly bigger than that other one. It's okay, like you can see, this is a pretty beefy stalk, so it must have been on the end or something like that. But for the most part, you're gonna get nice, small, like when they're fully open, they're gonna look like this. This is a pro-cut gold. Florists love them. Designers are like, oh, I just love your small sunflowers because they're so easy. And then in the fall, they can get even smaller because even though sunflowers are day length neutral, that means they will bloom even in short days. However, they're going to bloom smaller and shorter. So My sunflowers in July are like as tall or taller than me. My sunflowers that I plant at the very beginning of the season, so like my June and early July sunflowers might be like not even up to my waist, like just taller than my knee or something, you know, like maybe 30 inches tall. But that's okay. You just cut it at the ground. You still have a long enough stem. They are day length neutral, so they'll continue to bloom, but they will get smaller. So their heads will get smaller. And then like this one is really small. Do you see how small this is? The head popped off. But do you see how small that is? Like really tiny. But actually in the fall, they love these. They like put them in boutonnieres and corsage work. They don't even look like a sunflower. People are, you know, surprised like, "Oh, it's a sunflower." But look at how like perfect that is and how easy you can tuck that into a design. Usually in the fall when they're small, instead of doing 10 stems in a bunch, I do 12. And everybody's happy with that. I do plant them into bare soil. Like I don't use landscape fabric or anything. I just plant them, like I till it, I put down dry organic fertilizer, and I plant them into open soil, and I don't weed. I already talked about that. Like I was saying, in the beginning and the end of the season, they will be smaller. I do space them out a little farther in the bed. In the high summer, I put down 7 rows in a 36-inch bed, and otherwise I put down 6 rows, just so they'll be a little bit bigger, because sometimes they can be really small and spindly otherwise, and then they're not really sellable, or they break, or they're not really easy to use. That's what I do. For varieties, I really have grown pro cuts. I've also grown Vincent's Choice, but I'm going to talk about pro cuts first. So pro cuts are like just the staple flower farming sunflower variety. They're pollenless, which means they don't drop pollen. So they're never going to drop pollen on your table. You never want to grow a sunflower that has pollen in it. Florists, retail customers, nobody wants pollen dropping on their table. So I grow the pro cuts. And then I get like volunteers that have crossed and come back. I never sell those because they often will have pollen. So just be aware of that. They're like, "Oh, look, the sunflowers are coming back." Well, you don't know what they're going to look like, and they're probably going to have pollen. I know because I watch them and see them have pollen. So this is the Pro Cut Orange. So it's very classic dark center orange petals. And then I showed you the Pro Cut Gold. That's this. This is actually Pro Cut Gold Light, I think, which is like improved over the Pro Cut Gold. And then you might see the initials DMR. That's downy mildew resistant. And so all Pro Cuts, I believe, are DMR, which is important because they can get this disease called downy mildew, and then you can't sell them and they don't grow well. I've experimented with some other colors. This is the Pro Cut White Light. So it's got that green center with really pale petals. People love these. They also love the Pro Cut White Night, which has the same color petals but has a dark center. If you can grow those, good for you. I tried growing them last year just in the spring, and I think I sold like literally 5 stems out of, you know, several hundred that I grew. And the reason was because, I don't know, they're like a nightlight. Like the bugs are attracted to white or pale flowers, which most of you will probably know. But I don't know if it's because of the dark center and the light flowers. They just are eaten by bugs before you can even harvest them. And you can see like the white lights have a lot more bug damage. Like you can see that has a lot of bug damage. So like I wouldn't sell that, but they get more, but they don't get as much in my experience as the white nights. And so I just had so much damage. And I was like, I can't grow this. You can't grow something that you have like 95% crop loss on. And there's not really much you can do about it. Everything eats them. Japanese beetles, grasshoppers, I don't even know what else. So to me, I just have decided not to grow that. Then the other variety that I grow is in the fall, I grow the Pro Cut Bicolor or the Pro Cut Plum. Other ones are like Pro Cut Horizon. I like those as well. They're kind of more upright facing. They look like this, but their heads are like more facing up instead of out, I guess. So I like those as well. I've grown them in the past as well. I've also grown Vincent's Choice. I like the Vincent's Choice, the dark ones, and they're DMR, but they're gold. I don't remember what it's called, but they're ones that look kind of like this, are not downy mildew resistant, and I grew them last year and I just had a lot of crop loss. So I don't know, I just had more loss with them and less reliability. This year I'm only growing Pro Cuts, and that's honestly probably what I plan to stick with, at least at this point. So that's what I grow. I grow Pro Cuts. But just know that when you move away from the classic sunflower into these like specialty colors like the plums and the peach and there's a lot more colors that I'm mentioning, but the bicolors and these white nights and white lights, their necks, in my experience, especially the white light, their necks are just not as strong as the Pro-Cut Golds and the Horizon / Pro-Cut Orange. I've started quick dipping my Pro-Cut White Lights. I think that helps them have a stronger neck, and they don't last as long. They last well, but not as long as like your standard sunflower. Just be aware of that and just know that. So for me, growing these, I grow a tray of each of them. So I grow 264 of them every week. And the harvestable, sellable stems of white light is significantly less than either of the gold or the orange. Actually, this spring, they were really spindly and small. I'm not going to plant them in my early plantings because I lost all of them to being weak and small. And I think that just is attributed to, it's just early spring and the conditions aren't perfect and they're just not as robust of a sunflower. That's been my experience. I'd love to hear your experience with that. Maybe I should plant them farther apart. Maybe I might try something like that, but I'm not going to be planting them initially in the spring like I did this year. I completely lost all of them. And I could have used more like Pro-Cut Golds. That's kind of my theory anyway. So for harvesting, you want to harvest when the petals are just lifting off the face of the flower, like this. Like, for example, this was in my cooler. I didn't harvest it like this. I also wouldn't sell this. This is too far open. Don't take this as an example of, oh, she's going to go sell those. I'm not. I'll sell this, but you really need to harvest sunflowers every day. That's annoying to some people, but it's just the way it is. Especially when it's hot, you have to harvest them every day. And so to do that quickly and efficiently, I strip all my sunflowers first. So I just go through the row and I look at what is ready to harvest, and I just strip, like strip the plant. So I hold the head and I just strip down, and then I look for the next one and I just strip down and up. I usually go down and then back up because it makes the leaves fall off better. So I'll go through the whole bed and strip them, and then I come back. I started using a sickle this year to cut my sunflowers, and I really am liking this for sunflowers in particularly. So I just like cut them, and it's just a little easier and faster. So I use this, or you can use clippers. And then I just pile them all in my arm and then bring them to the bucket. So I can usually hold like 60 to 80 of them. Like I just like lay them in my arm as I harvest, and I just keep going down the whole bed until it's done. So I pretty much harvest them every day. They actually can be harvested later in the day, so they're not as fussy as some other flowers. It's not like you have to harvest them at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. every day. They're one that when I'm doing other harvesting, I will wait till like mid to late morning. You can still harvest them. I just put them with a CBVN tab. I've talked about those before. It's like a chlorine tablet basically, because sunflowers are considered a dirty flower. And so what happens is they let off the sap, they make the water dirty, and then it clogs up the stem, and then they don't take up water very easily. So I usually put like 2 in every bucket just to help with that. So I put those in every bucket that I harvest, but I especially put them in sunflowers. Like, don't skip them. Even if you're holding them for 24 hours, I would always put a CBVN tab in them. Typically when I harvest almost every other flower, I harvest in bunch in the field. So I'm harvesting 10 stems, bunching them with the rubber band, putting them in the bucket, counting how many bunches I have, and I never go back and reassess or really mess with the flowers again. But with sunflowers, I harvest them just by the stem, and I put them all in the bucket because I'm harvesting them every day. And then I have these 3 different colors too. So I just harvest them, put them in my cooler. I sell mostly on Tuesday. So usually on Monday, I get my 3 buckets of sunflowers out and I bring it in the garage, and then I bunch. So I use my floral choppers to chop them. So then I can look at the whole bucket and just like pick out of the bucket, like, you know, here's 10 gold, Pro-Cut Gold, and then here's 10 Pro-Cut Orange. I just really quickly can pull them out of the bucket, count them in tens, and chop them, rubber band them, and then I put them into like clean buckets of new water. And then I just put them, you know, back in the buckets all bunched. I have found that much more efficient than trying to harvest and bunch in the field. Sunflowers are just so big and heavy and tall. I'm harvesting them every day. I have just found that much more efficient. And then I sell to florists mostly. So some people that sell to florists, especially wedding and event florists, have stopped growing sunflowers. I've actually spoken to a lot of flower farmers that sell only wholesale, and they have stopped growing sunflowers. Just like to caveat, I rarely sell these to wedding and event florists. This year, I've sold 5 bunches of these classic sunflower for a wedding to one florist. That is not where the sales are coming from. They're not coming from wedding and event florists. They are coming from shop, brick and mortar florists that are doing retail work, they're doing funeral work, and that kind of stuff. And so most of my shops like that, even small shops, will take 3 to 5 bunches of sunflowers every week. Typically, they want 1 bunch of dark, 1 bunch of the light, and 3 of the Pro-Cut Gold. Pro-Cut Gold is my highest seller. I don't know if the Pro-Cut White Light would be a better seller if I had more of it or had it more consistently. The Pro-Cut Gold are definitely my higher seller. And then I have one retail shop that's pretty big. They like to buy a few things from me, but they buy larger quantities. And one of the things they buy is they buy like 8 to 10 bunches of sunflowers every week. But they only want like the gold and the white light. And I don't know if that's because they can get these cheaper or they have a standing order of them. I'm not sure exactly. But that's what I do. So I'm selling them to florists, but mostly brick and mortar florists. So if you're only selling for weddings and events, you probably don't want to grow very many of these. But they are one of my best sellers. I was looking at my analytics on Rooted Farmer, which is what I use to sell all my flowers and track my inventory. And for this season, they're fourth in my sales, but I have weeks more of these flowers. And the crops that are ahead of them in sales is like Campanula, which I don't have anymore. All the ones that are ahead of it in sales are spring crops that I'm not going to sell anymore, like Peonies, Ranunculus, Campanula. And that's what they're behind. So they're definitely going to catch some of them. They won't catch Ranunculus. They're going to be one of my top sellers, and they usually are in the season. So speaking of sales and profit and money, I sell a 10-stem bunch for $12.50, which other people sell them cheaper. I sell them for that price. I think they're worth it. Like, they're specialty sunflowers, and I have shops that have always bought them for that price. So that's what I sell them for, $12.50 for a 10-stem bunch. And speaking of selling flowers and selling to florists, I have a free guide, tips for selling flowers to florists. So if you're interested in selling flowers to florists or just want to know some baseline of how I start and different things that help me, check out that guide, Free Tips for Selling Flowers to Florists. The link is in the description. I do store them in the cooler for like 5 days. That's kind of like the max. They last like 14 days in a vase. They last a really long time, but I don't want to sell them fully open. So kind of like the standard for me, if I can see any of these stamens popping out of the center, I don't sell it. So if it's something that I've harvested, at the right stage and it's been in the cooler and it looks like this, I would sell this, but like just barely, right? So I wouldn't really sell any of the others of these. They're, all of these are too open and I don't want to sell them like that because my shops need to be able to have them and have good base life for their end customer and, be able to have time to sell them. Some people ask about netting. I do not net my sunflowers. I have actually tried to net them before and it's kind of a mess. So typically they're fine until August. And then in August, usually we get some big thunderstorms with a lot of wind. It's not the rain that knocks them down, it's the wind for sure. But what really gets them is if you have a storm with big wind, they usually actually do okay. The second storm that comes with a lot of wind and rain and the ground is already saturated 24 to 48 hours later, you can just have a whole bed go down. You can just have a whole crop go down. So one year I thought, okay, I'm going to net my sunflowers for the fall crops. I had them netted, I had them staked. The problem is the ones that are going down are the ones that are really big and top heavy because they're almost ready to harvest, but you can't harvest them yet. All that to say, it just took all that netting right down. And it just was kind of a disaster and it was super annoying and hard. And I just thought, you know what? This is just part of the risk that we take as farmers. Sometimes I lose my sunflower crops, and I really do. Like, sometimes the whole crop goes down in a storm. And it's usually just like a section of the crop, like the crop that's about to bloom. Not every single sunflower in every single stage of growing is going down. It's usually just the ones that are about to bloom. That's just how I deal with it. You're going to deal with loss as a farmer. And then I don't have sunflowers for a week sometimes. But otherwise, if I get the planting right, I will have them every week all the way through frost. Mid-June till frost, I plant them for 18 weeks in a row inside, transplant them outside with my paper pot transplanter, and they're just a really stable crop for me. To me, it's just kind of second nature now. But like I said, I'm 6 years in the making, tens of thousands of sunflowers, like thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of sunflowers that I've planted, harvested, and sold. So that's how I keep sunflowers blooming from mid-June all the way till frost on my farm. And I hope this helps you grow a few more for your own farm. And if you enjoyed this video, I highly recommend you check out my video I did on direct seeding. I did it in the spring. It's the middle of August, and it's a really great time to prepare for fall direct seeding, which is actually my favorite time to direct seed because you can get those crops in the ground in the fall, and you'll probably have crops hardy to you. I'm in zone 6A, we were 5B. Certain things overwinter beautifully here, and they give you the most amazing spring crops. So now's the time to plan for that. You can still order plugs, you can still order seeds, and you can still get your crops in the ground 6 to 8 weeks before your first fall frost, for most of us anyway. So it's a great time to be thinking about that. So check out that video about direct seeding that I did earlier this spring. And I hope this helps you on your farm this week, and we'll see you next time.